Hi, I'm Tom Payton, Director and Publisher at Trinity University Press. Thanks for joining us today to launch the new book, Land of Women by María Sánchez. As a nonprofit, cultural, and educational publisher, we are committed to an evolving agenda of work that engages, questions, and brings us together productively as a community, as we hope, and we hope you will find that in this discussion. María Sánchez was trained as a field veterinarian following in the footsteps of generations before her in a typically male profession. As she traveled the countryside of Spain, she bore witness to a rural life eroding before her eyes. Words, practices, and people slipping away because of depopulation, exploitation of natural resources, and inadequate environmental policies, as well as development encroaching on farmland and villages. As she became a writer chronicling life around her, she rebuffed the bucolic nature of rural life and showed us the multi-layered social complexity of people who are proud, resilient, and often misunderstood. Part memoir and part rural feminist manifesto, Land of Women acknowledges the sacrifices of Sanchez's female ancestors who enabled her to become the woman she is today. A bestseller in Spain, Land of Women has ignited conversations about the treatment and perception of rural communities everywhere. Just published for the first time in English, the book is enjoying great attention among the media and readers as well. Ms. Magazine just declared the book to be vital reading. Joining Maria in this conversation is the book's translator, Curtis Bauer. Curtis is the author of 3 poetry collections, most recently American Selfie. A faculty member at Texas Tech University's creative writing program. He has translated poetry and prose of Luis Muñoz, Fabio Marabito, and others. You can order Land of Women during this program at tupress.org using the link in the chat. You can also get a 20% discount using the promo code LOW20. That's LOW20, LOW20. Just use that at checkout. You can also find this code in the chat screen throughout the discussion. And now, please welcome Curtis Bauer and María Sánchez.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you, everyone else at Trinity University Press. I think I can speak on behalf of Maria as well, that we're thrilled to be here tonight. We're thrilled with the book. And we're thrilled to be able to have a conversation with all of you. I'm going to say a few words before we get started. And as a kind of introduction to this evening, to our reading conversation chat, I want to kind of bring your attention to a recent tweet that I saw of Maria's, in which she said, "Who would have thought the granddaughter of Carmen la Gordita would one day cross the ocean and be translated into English?" I immediately thought of my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, a farmer from Germany I grew up with. But then I checked myself. And I thought of my grandmothers I hardly knew, women who were silenced, not by force, but because they weren't given the opportunity to speak, to be listened to. Nesta Roberts, born in Wales and taken to the US as a baby, who hardly ever left Iowa after that. What would she have thought of her grandson going back across the ocean to translate María Sánchez into English? So eventually her grandson, her granddaughter, and her great-granddaughters would eventually understand and learn about her life and stories, ask about them. Or Irva Schwarting, born in rural Williamsburg, Iowa in 1919, first wife of Edward Schwarting, and then when he died, she married his brother William, my grandfather, the farmer. Irva, the farmer's wife, the baker, the canner, the cook, and the woman who taught me how to hold a fork and knife to sit proper in public. What was her childhood like? Why didn't I ask her to tell me about her life? These are some of the questions, some of the issues like silence, shadows, ignorance, María Sánchez's book, Land of Women, addresses. It's not just a call to action or a feminist manifesto, but also a manual for approaching, identifying, preserving, valuing what is on the verge of being lost. Our personal history, our connection to the land, animals, and nature, our understanding of kin and kinship, our language, our pending conversations with those who came before us, those who see stories, those whose stories and knowledge have been dwelling in the shadows because of their gender, their language, their social status, and if we're not careful, will disappear if we don't speak up, ask questions, and listen to them. We now have the opportunity to listen to Maria read a few pages from Tierra de Mujeres, and I'll read a translation of her selection. Then we'll have a conversation about a few key aspects of the book, bringing in your questions and comments the whole while. So please feel free to add those in the chat, and I'll try and get to all of them. And yeah, let's have a conversation, but I'll now turn it over to Maria.
Before reading, I will say thank you, Curtis, for your introduction. Thank you, Trinity University Press, for making possible this conversation about land women. I'm so happy to be here with all you. So I'm going first to read in Spanish. Por suerte, pertenezco a una generación que brilla y que tiene una labor fundamental. Rescatar a todas esas mujeres que han quedado apartadas a lo largo de los años, sin voz, como se dejan solos, sin remordimiento ninguno a esos muebles de algunas casas vacías junto a las polillas, amparados bajo una sábana inútil que no ofrece ninguna protección. Solo la invisibiliza, solo apaga su voz. Gracias a este despertar colectivo, gracias al feminismo, surge una búsqueda incansable y necesaria. Al fin estamos conociendo a científicas, escritoras, activistas, pensadoras, ecologistas, conservacionistas. Mujeres que se movieron y destacaron en un mundo de hombres, pero que por el hecho de ser mujeres pasaron totalmente desapercibidas. Afortunadamente, hoy los papeles han cambiado. Las historias de las mujeres salen a la luz y se convierten en referentes, modelos a seguir y vidas que contar para las niñas de nuestros días y de los que vendrán. Cuando empezamos a ser conscientes de lo importante que es reconocerse en alguien, surge un sentimiento nuevo. Sentirse hermana de alguien que conoce el camino. Convertirla en una pieza clave en nuestra historia, en un engranaje que nos permitirá crecer día a día. Una estela que poder continuar y crear, al fin, nuestra propia narrativa. Queremos mujeres en todos los espacios, que sean ellas las que cuenten, formen y construyan, que sean ellas las que puedan dar el paso adelante sin sentir miedo ni vergüenza. Es algo que ahora vemos completamente normal en nuestro día a día. Nos enfadamos si notamos que no hay mujeres en cualquier lugar y evento. Alzamos la voz, escribimos, nos manifestamos, celebramos. Y yo, mujer que procede del medio rural y que trabaja en él, me vuelvo a sentir hoy como ese péndulo oscilante del reloj de la pared, como una cuerda que cae pero que a la vez está sujeta, como ese cubo que bajamos al pozo sin saber qué nos traerá de vuelta a subirlo a la luz. Porque estoy intentando construir una casa donde tengan refugio todos esos destellos que me han traído hasta aquí. Unos cimientos y unas paredes que den cobijo a las palabras, a las nanas, a los animales, que pueda sentirme acompañada, no de fantasma, no de sombra, que me sienta segura para hablar del lugar del que vengo y en el que vivo, pero siempre que empiezo a poner el siguiente ladrillo pasa lo mismo. La casa que construía solo estaba llena de hombres. Mi narrativa invisible, las mujeres de mi casa, como la umbría, esa zona de las laderas en la que apenas llega el sol, esas vertientes que por su orografía quedan dedicadas a la sombra. En la umbría también crecen especies fuertes, árboles y plantas que necesitan más agua, animales que van en su busca para refugiarse y alimentarse, como los hombres en verano que se sientan en ella a descansar entre faena y faena, la sombra, la falta de luz, Que no podamos verla, o mejor dicho, que no sepamos verla, no significa que no esté ahí. ¿Acaso, además del nombre, necesitamos la luz para existir? Vuelvo a ese proyecto de casa y miro a mi alrededor. Rebusco en los libros, en las estanterías, en los recortes. Leo lo que escribieron sobre el medio rural otro antes, lo que escriben sobre el medio rural otro ahora. Y tropiezo y una y otra vez con esa literatura que nos llama granjeros, que nos asocia siempre a la palabra vacía, que nos describe desde el paternalismo y las grandes ciudades, que nos visita para reportajes graciosos, que se empeña en escribir del medio rural como si fueran sepultureros, que usurpa la voz de los que se manchan las manos de tierra y habitan entre campiñas y montañas, que tampoco, qué sorpresa, las nombra a ellas. Nuestro medio rural necesita otras manos que lo escriban, unas que no pretendan rescatarlo ni ubicarlo, unas que sepan de la solana y de la umbría, de la luz y la sombra, de lo que se escucha y lo que se intuye, de lo que tiembla y lo que no se nombra. Una narrativa que descanse en las huellas de todas esas que se rompieron las alpargatas pisando y trabajando, a la sombra, sin hacer ruido, y que siguen solas, esperando que alguien las reconozca y comience a nombrarlas para existir.
This selection is from chapter 1 of the first section. It's called A Genealogy of the Countryside. Fortunately, I belong to a brilliant generation that has a crucial task: to rescue all those women who have been pushed aside over the years, left alone, without remorse, without a voice, like those pieces of furniture in some empty houses together with the moths, covered by a useless sheet that offers no protection. It only makes them invisible. It only extinguishes their voice. Thanks to this collective awakening, thanks to feminism, a tireless and necessary search emerges. At last, we are getting to know women, scientists, women writers, activists, thinkers, ecologists, conservationists, women who moved and stood out in a world of men, but who, because they were women, went completely unnoticed. Fortunately, today the roles have changed. The stories of women are coming to light and becoming reference points, offering role models to follow and live, and lives that matter for girls today and for those to come. When we begin to be aware of how important it is to recognize ourselves in someone, a new feeling emerges, to feel like the sister of someone who knows the way. We can turn her into a key element in our history, into part of the apparatus that will allow us to grow day by day, a path to extend and create, at last, our own narrative. We want women in all areas and spaces. They should be the ones who narrate, teach, and build. They should be the ones who can move forward without feeling afraid or ashamed. It's something that we know, that we now think is completely normal in our daily lives. We get angry if we notice that there are no women wherever we are in any kind of event. We speak out, we write, we take to the streets, we celebrate. And I, a woman who comes from a rural community and who works in it, today I feel like that swinging pendulum on the wall clock, like a rope that falls away but is at the same time attached, like that bucket we lower into the well without knowing what it will bring up to us when we raise it to the light. Because I'm trying to build a home to shelter all those destellos, those flashes that have brought me here. Some foundations and some walls that give sanctuary to words, to lullabies, to animals, so I can feel accompanied, not by ghosts, not by shadows. So I feel safe to talk about where I come from and where I live. But whenever I start to lay the next brick, the same thing happens. The house I was building was only full of men. My invisible narrative, the women in my house, like the shadowy area, that part of the mountainside the sun hardly reaches, those slopes that, due to their orography, remain steadfast to the shade. Strong species also grow in the shade. Trees and plants that need more water, animals that search it out for shelter and for nourishment, like men in summer who sit in it to rest between work and chores, the shadow, the absence of light, that we can't see them, or rather that we don't know how to see them, doesn't mean that they aren't there. Is it possible that besides our name, we need light to exist? I go back to that home project and look around. I search in my books, on my shelves, and newspaper clippings. I read what others wrote about rural communities before, what others write about rural communities now, and I stumble. I stumble again and again over that literature that calls us farmers, which always associates us with that empty word, which describes us out of that patronizing attitude and from the big cities, which visit us for their funny news stories, which insist on writing about the rural community as if they were grave diggers, appropriating the voice of those hands whose hands are smudged with dirt and inhabit the countryside and mountains. Nor do they, what a surprise, mention ellas, the women. Our rural community needs other hands to write about it, hands that do not claim to rescue it or situate it, hands that know about the sunny spots and the shade, about light and shadow, about what is heard and what is intuited, about what trembles and what is not named. A narrative that rests in the footprints of all those women who wore out their espadrilles walking and working in the shadow without making noise, and who remain alone, waiting for someone to recognize them and begin to name them into existence. So thank you, Maria, for choosing that selection. Usually we talk a little bit beforehand to see, you know, what we want to read, what she wants to read, and what we want to talk about. And it's always a lovely surprise. And so tonight, I want to kind of jump into a conversation. And the first thing that kind of comes to mind in this section is an item that you mentioned. It's your home project. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that is for you. That, you know, if you could discuss the home project.
The house, the building of the house, no? Like,
yeah.
In some way, I use this picture like in a poetic way, because I can't avoid that. I think that I'm more poet than writer. But it's also like a picture that shows that all my reference, all the people I want to be like, they always were men. My teacher, veterinarians, writers, conservationists, ecologists, all those men, all those people I want to be like, all they were men. So at some point in my life, I started to wondering myself where were the women, no? So the picture of the house is me destroying the bricks. I don't know, it's correct, no? The stone of the walls, and looking at my bookcase and discover that all the books I love from being a child, all of them are from men. So I have to start again building a house where can be there books, women, artists, writers, but more diversity, you know. So to me, it was very powerful, that picture of the house, of your own house, because it's your own house that you decide to, no, I have to destroy this, and you have to build again. And it's obvious that you are going to take some of all these old bricks that was there, because, you know, I'm reading, I have to think about how to say, because it's difficult, you know. It's like you have a new perspective, but you also have your love to all these books, you know. For example, one of my favorite writer when I was a teenager, and also is still is one of my favorite poets, better than writer, is García Lorca. So when I took that brick of my old house, that is García Lorca, it's come with me to the new house. So I think that the house is like an invitation to all people to check our books or privilege or supposition or thoughts about a lot of questions that I think that Land of Women is a book full of questions.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And you talk about at some point asking questions, talking to the women who are important in your life, but also asking to hear their stories and listening, right? And maybe later on you can talk a little bit about that, but I want to go back to this idea of the bricks and thinking about another brick being, or maybe it's not just one brick, but many bricks, the concept of feminism, right? And how you talk about we have feminism. And I think that you've got a lot to say about that, because it's such a large concept, but there's some very unique or some important distinctions that you make in this book about that. Could you talk a little bit to the audience about that?
Yes, I think that it's important to say that when I was a teenager, I didn't understand my mother, I didn't understand my uncle, my grandma, all the women in my family. So I was very angry because I didn't understand why they were like that, especially with my mother, because I lived with her. So these women always were the perfect mirror of what I didn't want to be. But I never asked myself why. So one of the questions that I did myself a lot is why did I ask myself so late about them? Why are not aware of the backpacks they carry, their origins, their stories, their renunciations, the inequality, machismo, the era, the time in which they were born, no? So I think that feminism in this case was for me like the windows that opens and you see a new landscapes, also like a flash, I love the flash, this picture of the flash, the blindfold that falls from your eyes and reveals you another way of seeing everything and understanding the things that surround you. Also, I think that show you another way of being in the world with the other, no? So I think that it's very important to speak about the feminists and not to understand only a way of being feminist that is very typical, that in some cities, for example, in big cities, we think that the feminists, it's also a discuss that maybe come from the academy, from the university, that maybe within that feminists have to be, like a boss with very, very size, like you can change the shape. So it's very important to understand that not every woman is the same that other woman. And for me, it's very important to understand that there is no single feminist. That is very important to me. I believe in the intersectional feminist. For example, you don't have only a single axis of oppression, no? And it's not fair to say that it's the same, that a rural woman is the same that a rural migrant woman, no? There are a lot a lot of difference. Also, there is a big gap between them. And for me, it's very important to speak about that, because sometimes we are thinking about a feminist and we are thinking that every woman has to do the thing in the way you are thinking, but you never ask yourself about the town or the village they live, the links and the way of connect or linking with the other, or if in what place they are living, how are they. So it's very important now to speak about this and bring out the shadows.
To to bring them out, to recognize them, to hear yes, yeah. Well, thinking about that, another aspect of this is about, I guess, being in the presence or being in situations where you have that opportunity. So I'm wondering if you could share an event or a series of events that led you to write the book. What was that flash for you that was like, oh, I need to write this, I need to do this?
One important flash that they say to me, this flash, you have to write this, is when my father started telling me the story of my grandma Pepa that appears in the books. It was curious at the same time. It was sad, because I have to become a reader for my family to start sharing of stories, no? So, my first book was poetry, was Cuaderno de Campo. And they discovered that with this book, the book was having successful, was having a lot of reviews. The books sold a lot of copies. So it was like the flash for my family to say, oh, our child is very interesting in our stories, in the country things and rural links and rural history links and connections. So it was very, very good how to see how your family, your neighbor, the people of your village start to share you a lot of things. And the sad thing, about this is that a lot of time I ask myself, what happened with these stories if I never start writing? Where do the stories go? Disappear? Never, or they are in silence because nobody maybe tell it. So it's a miss of feeling, because I think the books for my family, for many people, because I have a lot of meeting with reader, every week I got a lot of messages from social media, email, from a lot of reader from Germany, France, Latin America, Argentina, Chile. So it's very good, no? Because it has been like awakening. I don't know if I say it correct. If it is as if the books helps them to break the silence, maybe to feel that their voice and their stories are worthwhile, that they also need to be shared and celebrated. And we have to realize that every voice is valid and could be shared, celebrated, and we have to hear, to listen to all these stories. So at the same time, I think that is one of my best presents that the book has given to me, all those little and big stories that keep coming to me from the readers.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different things that we could talk about with that. I mean, mean, one of the things that, when I first encountered this book and was first talking about it with publishers and with people to discuss the significance of it, I described it as, yes, there's, this veterinarian poet who's writing a kind of personal narrative about her life and also about the rural community in Spain. But the book is so much more than that, right? It's so much more than just about you or just about the rural community in Spain. It can be connected to, as I was mentioning, thinking about the grandmothers, I grew up with, but I never asked them questions, really. Of course, the day-to-day things, but what was their childhood like? What joys and things did they have? And then also to think of the rural community in the United States, the rural community, emptied states, where people are leaving because they don't see a future. You address a number of those things that I think have a parallel quality, in countries around the world. It's not just particular to Spain, right? So, yeah, I'll add, just say out loud, if anyone's got a question, please feel free to put it into the chat. Because I've got a bunch, but I also want you all to participate. We've talked about, or you talk about, a number of writers, who have been influential to you in writing this. And in the book, you talk about Robert Macfarlane. But in our conversations, you've also talked about Robin Wall Kimmerer. And so I wonder if you could talk about some of these writers who maybe our audience members recognize, know of, but why they've been so influential in your practice.
Maybe because I feel empty with this writer in Spain. So when I discovered this writer that writes so well, amazing and fantastic, for me, very, very special. It was like I discovered a new world, in special with Robin Wall Kimmerer. When I read her articles, her books, it's like, oh my God. It also happens to me with Terry Tempest Williams. Is one of my favorite writers. She appears in my book when I'm telling the story of her mother who left her notes, paper notes, who are empty because she has to start reading her story, and she discovered that she didn't know anything about her mother, about the life of her mother before having her, being mother. So to me, it's very important to break this central narrative about in that always white, occidental, men with privilege are the writers at the center of the narrative, are the voice that we are used to hear. We are the writer we are used to read, but there are a lot of different and diverse voices that for me are very, very important and very special in this time of crisis, climate change, and pandemics. So how to say, we need to read writers like Robin Wall Kimmerer and Terry Tempest Williams, obviously, because they are speaking about the love to the land, the necessity to have a conversation not with the other people, even with the land, with the resources, with the other beings. They teach us, for example, that there are another ways of living in the planet, a part of the capitalism, of the system we are. That before when you were speaking that you about your grandma, your grandpa, the thing that you are from another country that is not Spain, I was thinking that maybe this is something very common at the end, because we are all in the same system that is very focused in the money, in the production, and not is focused in the care, in the care, in the life, you know, in the protection of the nature. So maybe it's one of the seeds of the books that is like naming the roots, naming the house you come from, you know. I love one, to sum up, I love, you know, I love the words, and I fall in love with one word from Robin Wall Kimmerer, with the process that she wrote about discovering that the language of her land and her family speak is in danger. And she discovered in her book the word Papuwi, that you can translate as the force which causes mushroom to pass up from the hair overnight. Maybe we need that Papuwi, that strong, that force, no, to connect, to link with the other, to create kinship, to take care of the planet and all the other beings. I think it's very important.
Yeah. You said a couple of things. I mean, the focus here is language, but you're using the metaphor of seeds, right? And you talk about the terrain, and you talk about the seed that then grows and becomes, you know, gives life, right? And one of your current projects is Almaciga, right, where you're thinking about the seedbed of language, and you're collecting words or language that is falling falling into disuse or on the verge of extinction, just as you work with autonomous breeds in Spain on the verge of extinction, right? So there is this connection. Could you talk a little bit about these projects of yours?
Yes, it's very funny, because at the end I'm working with the same things. You know, when I wrote Land of Women, I have another kind of work, but now I only working with this breed of animals who are in danger of extinction, because they are very adapted to the land, you know. So maybe they are less productive, but they are better adapted to climate change. They produce healthy foods. They help to fight the population. They contribute to avoid the wildfires. I don't know if it's correct to say. So in this era of climate change, these animals are decay, but the things that the system is not interested in that, because they don't give money, you know, they don't give money. So I can tell you when my love for words, speaking of my last project, Almaciga, that is also, I think, it's present in Land of Women, this word for words that don't appear in the dictionary and aren't considered part of culture began. In my first book, in Cuaderno de Campo, some words and expressions from rural areas are there. For example, I use one that in Spanish is lavarse la boca, is wash the mouth. That I love that expression that use the shepherd after summer, when it starts to rain and the first grass, the sheep start grassing, the first grass grow up. These people say, look, the sheep are washing their mouth, because that first grass is like water, and you are you are waiting for it with so desperately because it's summer, you know, it's September, so they are like, oh, we want that grass, no? So I used that expression in a poem. And Land of Women, these words are part of the book, are fundamental because they are basis, you know, they are roots for me. I think that every time a word like them dies, there is a word dying. It's not just about language, accent, or meaning. It goes beyond that. We are talking about a world, about a unique way of living and inhabiting a territory, of relating to others. I'm also thinking of all beings, the air, the resources, you know. So when some of this world disappears, also a kinship dies, I think.
There's that word again, kinship, right? I mean, we've talked about how beautiful that word is, and to just thinking of when someone dies, their language dies with them, but there is an opportunity to pass that language on, right? By having this conversation and thinking of, you know, being in a place where it's used. And if you're, when you buy the book, you're going to encounter this. There's a section there where you talk about language as seeds that you're sowing when you go to the city, right? The rural usage, or the rural, this word that is used in a rural community, and you want to make sure that it takes root, right? That it grows into usage again. So you start to sow those words in your conversations. I mean, I think it's such a brilliant act, right? We have a comment here from Deborah Ochoa. Your book resonates with Spanish Catalan films made by women in the last 5 to 10 years. I'm also thinking about Carla Simon's Verano 93, or Verano 93, but also the novel by Irene Sola, When I Sing, Mountains Dance. There seems to be a growing focus on rural areas. Can we consider the focus on rural areas a movement in literature and film?
I think that yes, I'm not expert on this area, but I think that is something that is cyclic, you know. For example, the last Carla Simon film, Alcarrás, is about the problem with the renewables energy. I don't know, Curtis.
Renewable energy.
It's about a small family of farmers who have a vegetable patch of trees, or peach trees. I don't know, it's already not.
Yeah.
So they have to leave to work the land because they are going, the owner of this land is going to put this renewable. So it's about money, but it's very interesting because this issue, a Catalonian writer, Mercè Ibars, wrote about it 30 years ago in Catalan, La Tierra Retirada, that now in Spain is published in Spanish. But I think that is an issue that constantly we are coming back to. You know, Lorca, Federico Lorca, in the book I use that quote of him. He spoke about this, about listening to the people from the land, from the villages, because they have a special link to the land, to the animals. And I also think that it has a lot to do. It has very things in common due to the system in we are, you know. We are a generation that maybe we are tired of this kind of life. We are the system, the money, you know, the, I don't know how to say in English, precariedad. climate change. So
yeah, a precarious way of
so
precarious living,
maybe
yeah.
there are a lot of people who are asking, wondering themselves, looking back to their roots, not to be in the same way they were, you know, maybe doing question, searching answer to know how to build a better future for everyone.
You've talked about kind of the difference between the center and the margins, right? And in the section we talked about, or we read tonight, you mentioned the writing about rural communities from the city, from urban centers. And you could even say that you know, this idea of giving voice or giving a question or giving attention, it's always coming from the center, from an urban center, from a particular group, predominantly male, writing about that.
Totally.
And we've talked about how when the margins have attention, it's usually something negative, right? Something that occurs that well, we recognize that because of some crime or because of some mistreatment or because of, you know,
Bad
pollution
news,
or whatever.
always.
Right. So I mean, I wonder in this case, thinking about Deborah's question, you know, can we consider the focus on rural areas and movement in literature and film, but also, you know, what have we been missing? What haven't we recognized that has already been written, you know, by people from the margins, right? That maybe now we're beginning to discover. And I wonder if there's someone that you've encountered, writers or filmmakers, artists who have been working all of this time, but suddenly now we can focus on them.
Totally, is very obviously for me. There are a lot of very good and talented people working in the margins. That the thing is that they don't have the place and the altavoz. I don't know how to say the the altavoz.
The opportunity to speak.
The opportunities,
I mean,
but the opportunity to be heard and to show
to be heard.
the work. So in Spain, since 3 years ago, the narrative is completely changing. Now we know a lot of margins creators, artists from the margins, but before it was constantly the center, Madrid, Barcelona, you know. And I think that in this case, my book help it a lot to break this single way to write about the land or to make a film. So I think it's very important to realize that there is not only a voice, there is not only a way to do things, to write a book, to make a film. And now we are seeing a lot of people doing. I was thinking in Carla Simon, in another writers, another filmmakers, for example, Oliver Lache with the film O que Arde about a wildfire in Galicia. So all this work is happening, no? So we have maybe the things that we have to change the way of looking at rural areas and the people who are living in.
Yeah, great. Well, again, I wonder if you've got another question, please share. I think we've got time for maybe one more or a couple of other questions. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask one that Oh, yeah. Jennifer Acker asks, Maria, how do you think that growing up in a rural area has affected your writing style? For example, the rhythms of sentences, the language, the images you use. Great question.
I could say that if I never had my childhood in the country, maybe today I won't be here. And maybe my books won't be published, you know. Maybe I won't be a writer, because it was very, very special. It was a gate to me. And in the book, I think I wrote about it, about that the ways, the rhythm, the living in a country, and for example, in the land, how a seed grow up, and how a tree lives, and how an animal is hidden because the predator is there, waiting for the attack. Is so similar, these rims of the land, to the rims of the reading. So I don't know, I'm always thinking about that. Maybe my childhood was essential to become a writer. A lot of time also I ask myself about my mother, you know, and my grandmother, that maybe if they could have the same rights that now I have, that maybe if they couldn't have to live in a dictatorship in a time of machismo and inequality, maybe my mother could be the writer today, and maybe my mother could be join with us in this meeting, no? But they don't have this opportunity. But totally, I think that is so special to me. The land, the country, this way of living in a village is very important in my narrative. I think it's central.
This is from David Marwitz. I'm watching from Marfa, Texas. We're 55 miles from our border with Mexico, and we're in a severe drought. In Texas and throughout the US, we are seeing people that opposed women's rights and immigration that are very vocal, angry, and are ignoring facts. Do you see the same oppositions to immigrants and women's rights in Spain as we are seeing here? Also, I have ordered your book from our local bookstore, and I can't wait for it to arrive.
Thank you so much, David. Yes, sadly, it's very sad, but it's happening the same in Spain. We are having this public discuss that are very sad about migrant people and about women's rights. We are now with the abortion also discussing. And it's very sad that you are living in 2022 and still we have to discuss these things. For example, in Spain, in the principal workers in rural areas, in farms, in greenhouses, in the production of the food, as in your country, are migrant people. And they don't have rights, they are living in bad conditions. I think that is again about the thing I was speaking before about the system. We are living in a system who is against the life. The life is not in the center. And we are using this worker like an object, you know, like, because we need more production, more money, more all, but not, we don't take care of them. And it's so sad, because these, for example, these are the people who made possible our food. Is one of the questions that I think I throw up in the book, because it's very important for us. We have to fight for rights for everyone. I think that, like, we are in a crisis time, In these times, there are people from with these ideas, very dangerous ideas, who approach this time of crisis of fear to share these ideas with migrant and rights, women rights, and it's very, very dangerous. I think that we have to how to say, sorry, we have to combat against that.
This is a question from Priscilla Ibarra. I love your sensibility of feminism as building a new way of inhabiting the world. What is the current sense of the link between feminism and ecological issues in Spain? I think you're talking about this already, but perhaps more of a focus on a sense of ecofeminism and how that might vary among cultures in Spain, including migrants and immigrants from the colonized territories.
Thank you, Priscilla. It's a very good question. Totally. I think that it could be ecofeminist, but I love to use another word. It's agro-ecofeminist. In Spanish, it will be agroecofeminism, because to me it's very important to include agro, the agriculture, because we need to eat, and we can't think that we are separate from the land and from the nature. We are nature. We are the land also. The land is not something that we don't have nothing with them, you know? So to me, it's very important to be conscious about this. And in Spain is we have the luck, we had very, very good women experts in ecofeminism. One of them is Yayo Herrero. She's wonderful, and her books and her essays are very nice. And also with migrants and immigrants, they are a very, very, very good collective that is from the south of Spain. I spoke about them in the books. It's Jornaleras de la Fresa en Lucha. It's like I don't know, union workers could be.
Union workers.
This includes migrants and also immigrants, also Spanish workers that are working in the red fruits, you know, in the greenhouses. And they are doing a lot of work for their rights. They are approaching a lot of things like appearing in newspaper, having meetings with the minister, with the, you know, with politics, and it's very, very important, the work they are doing.
Right. Well, I think we're close to the end. I'll just mention again our thanks to Trinity, and thank you all for joining us. And as Bridget has been typing in here, you can get the book Land of Women at a discount with the code that's in the chat. But it's been great, as always, speaking with you, Maria, and talking about your book. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, everyone. I unless there's another question, I think that's it.
Maybe I could present you a word from Almáciga.
Yes, yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
Yes. Before I was speaking about, you know, the grass, and there is a word that is one of my favorites that my father gave to me. It's jabardillo, and it's like a flock of birds, but it's a special flock because it's as very small flock. So when you see a very small flock of birds in the sky, you can say jabardillo, and I think that is beautiful.
That's great, and it can be any small flock of birds.
Yes, doesn't matter what kind of bird. It's about the size of the flock.
It's so great. Let me share one other thing with all of you, that another thing that Maria is doing, in addition to her work as a veterinarian and writer and doing interviews, she's also writing this fantastic series of articles about food. And the last one that I read is about asparagus. And the first line of this is, she asks her father how he learned to pick asparagus, find them. And he said, you can learn a lot by walking.
Yes.
And I think it's such a wonderful way to look at the world, but also
Totally.
I'm offering all of that to you tonight as we sign off. You can learn a lot about the world by walking and being out in it, and just, yeah.
And
So
looking
thank
at.
you, Maria. And looking, yes. Okay. Well, thank you all, and yeah, good night.
Thank you so much. Bye.